All right, more Robert La Follette ideas that were enacted in Wisconsin. The idea, and he will push for this in federal Senate, the direct election of senators. And the idea behind this is state legislators at the time picked their senators that would be sent to the United States Congress. And La Follette knew that representatives and senators were being bribed by these big trusts, by these businesses, and his thought was that if people directly on their ballot elect senators, then that will fight corruption as well. And Wisconsin will be the first state to enact a state income tax. I want to say 1913. That's what I was looking at. Yep. No, sorry. In 1913, the 17th Amendment will be passed, and that will enact a federal income tax. But Wisconsin is the first to do a state income tax. Sorry. Other ideas pushed politically during this time period is the Australian ballot. So we talked about in class, you pick up your color card, you go across, and you vote. The Australian ballot, also called the secret ballot, is not like that. You register at a table, you go to a table, the voting cards are there, you punch a hole, you circle something like that. And so that counteracts the idea of everyone knows who you're voting for so they can intimidate you. So that's a good thing. It cuts down on voter, corruption in a sense. Unfortunately, it also eliminates those that are illiterate, which is many immigrants as well. Many immigrants couldn't speak English. So party workers couldn't help voters mark their ballots. It wasn't like, oh, you need to vote for this person or you need to pick up this color card. It is you go to a box and you vote by yourself. So hundreds of thousands of blacks and hundreds of thousands of immigrants who couldn't read or write English were then effectively disenfranchised. So Teddy Roosevelt, sometimes called TR, so when you see TR, it's Teddy Roosevelt. He's sometimes considered the first modern president because he's coming to the presidency during this time period where industrialization has already taken place, but progressive ideas are being pushed as well. He will use his platform to directly influence public interest, and that is sometimes called the bully pulpit. So he uses his pulpit to bully his soapbox, essentially, his power to try and influence what's going on. He is mostly moderate, but he does support a lot of progressive ideas. We look back now and see him as middle of the road compared to our politicians, but for his day, supporting those progressive ideas in the face of these big businesses was pretty liberal. So his campaign slogan and his platform, all wrapped up into one in 1906, is called the Square Deal. Like you hear someone saying you get a square deal on a car, they're saying a good deal. It's good for everyone. It's good for the buyer of the car while still making the seller of the car some money. So his square deal, good for everyone deal, involves the 3 C's, and this is on your Quizlet as well. So controlling corporations, consumer protection, and conservation of natural resources. And we're going to dive into examples during his presidency and after of him pushing these things. He will also run for president multiple times. So 1906, let me do math real quick, 1906, 1910, and 1912, but he is unsuccessful in 1912, I believe. I'll fact check. So first issue, an example of his control of corporations is an issue with mining trusts, and the mining market being cornered essentially by these coal companies. This is also called the United Mine Workers Strike, which is what it is on your Quizlet. But anthracite is the coal company name. So the anthracite coal strike, or the United Mine Workers Strike, is so 140,000 workers go on strike demanding a 20% increase in pay and reduction of the workday from 10 hours to 9 hours. And the company just refuses to work with them. They also want fairer weighing of coal. So a lot of working in mines depending on how much you individually mine, and there was some corruption in how much you mine was weighed. the materials you mined were weighed. So the company essentially says, we're not going to negotiate. The president of the company assumed the public would react against the workers because they're not getting coal for their houses, and that there'd be like public pressure for the strike to end. But he was in fact wrong. Teddy Roosevelt, upset with the bad trust of the coal companies, threatens to take the mines and say, I will send federal troops to mine this property if you as the owners do not cooperate with the labor union, do not increase your workers' pay, do not reduce their hours. And so this is an example of Teddy Roosevelt rationalizing, well, the public is in jeopardy because if there's no coal, there's no heat during this time period and winter's coming, but also protecting the rights of workers and trying to control the power of corporations. Roosevelt also establishes a new government part of the bureaucracy, the Department of Labor and Commerce. And essentially the idea is to stop disputes between capital and labor, the owners and the laborers. And they will try and probe businesses and break up trusts, and they will be put into action with the Northern Securities Company, which is a company that's partially owned by J.P. Morgan. It's a railroad company in the Northwest, and essentially they have a monopoly of railroads going out to the Northwest and in the Northwest, think like Seattle, Washington State area. And Roosevelt goes after this using the Department of Commerce and Labor, bringing a lawsuit against them, an antitrust lawsuit, and the Supreme Court upholds it, and Roosevelt will be seen as a trust buster now. His legacy of busting up trust, breaking up trust, and making it possible for small businesses to not only not be exploited by corporations, but actually have a chance at breaking into the business. Later on, the Supreme Court will look at other trusts like beef trust, sugar trust, fertilizer trust, harvester, surplus grain storage trust, and they will be severely regulated by trust legislation, thanks to Teddy Roosevelt kind of starting that. All right, consumer protection. What are people buying? Is it worth the money they're paying for, and is it safe? We already talked about the Meat Inspection Act. The selling of meat across state lines had to be federally inspected and a tax paid for it. The Pure Food and Drug Act, like I said, will eventually lead to the FDA. It prevented mislabeling of foods and drugs. It made many medicines have to have more, I guess, precise labels of what's going on. So that affects grocery stores and pharmacies as well. So the whole meatpacking industry, this is probably one of the best political cartoons to explain what's going on. So we have TR here, and the Capitol behind him, and he has the rake of investigation, and he's going through the meat scandal. So although he is not a big fan of muckrakers, they have brought to light issues that he cares about, consumer protection. Here's some pictures of the meatpacking industry during the day. Skip, click, click, click. Here we go. Conservation is probably one of Teddy Roosevelt's largest legacies. He was a very outdoorsy man. He was a very strong man. He loved big game hunting. He loved safaris and South America and Africa and all these different places. And so his idea with conservation is he's just appalled at the destruction of timber and natural resources and mineral resources for industrial gain. And so his idea is not, let's stop it all, but more like control our pollution, intelligently use our resources, plant more resources that we can, like trees, promoting nature as recreation, getting outside sort of national parks, and protecting the environment from pollution. This will be done through different public opinion campaigns, different fundraising efforts to build dams for hydroelectric power, which was seen as cleaner even back then, even now, and saving forests and just using resources sustainably. He really did love nature. All right, I fact-checked myself. I got my dates wrong earlier. Sorry, friends. Dates don't stick in my head very well. So Teddy Roosevelt had won in 1900. He wins re-election in 1904. I was correct about 1912. He runs in 1912, but he is not successful then. So looking at after Teddy Roosevelt, we kind of looked at both of his terms. Moving on into William Taft here. Taft's style kind of lacked the fire or guts that Teddy Roosevelt had. He was just seen as like staying middle of the road, more old guard, laissez-faire economics, not going to get involved, president, which was very different than Teddy Roosevelt, who kind of rode the line of very progressive. So keeping that status quo is kind of what Taft was known for, not like the mugwumps or the progressives of the time. However, Taft is going to be, like Roosevelt started this chain of breaking up trust, but Taft really continues it. And Standard Oil, one of the biggest trusts and one of the biggest resources that Americans need, oil and gasoline, is going to be dissolved during his time as president, and that's major. So there's going to be some progressive legislation left over from Teddy Roosevelt's time that Taft will continue, even though he is less liberal, more conservative in this way. Conservation-wise, the Bureau of Mines, a government agency, will regulate how much stuff is being mined from the ground, mineral resources. The Mann-Elkins Act puts telegraphs and now telephones are becoming more popular under control of the Interstate Commerce Commission, so a government organization that's in charge of things that happen across states and the taxing of that and the who makes money off of that. And then this populist idea of a postal savings bank, remember that from the populist era, will actually be put into law. So postal savings bank here is essentially the post office department is allowed to receive saving, like the post office has like a mini bank in it essentially during this time period, where they can receive savings deposits, and they can, like, if it builds up enough in your little bank account at the post office, they can pay interest dividends on it. So 2% per year on such deposits. And this was a populist idea, and now it's a thing. So the Republican Party as a whole is going to have a lot of splitting up during this time period. The Payne-Aldrich tariff has to do with that. Essentially, it kind of reduces the tariff that the Republicans don't like, but there are some taxes add-ons to it. Taft had said he's not going to mess with the tariff issue, but he did. He signed this bill. Progressives get mad, and we're going to see the split of a party. We also have a controversy where the Secretary of Interior takes a lot of land in Wyoming and Colorado that's like public, not like national park, but public land, and he lets corporations mine off of it and make money off of it. And there is an agricultural department head, like secretary of the agriculture department, Gifford Pinchot, I definitely said that wrong, basically criticized him. Taft has this like fake reason for firing Pinchot, which makes Taft look like he's not for the environment, which many Teddy Roosevelt progressives absolutely hate. So Republican Party pushed even further. We will go over this political cartoon in class. But Teddy Roosevelt, he's not even in politics. He's not even in America. Comes back because he hears about this tariff issue and about this conservatism idea, and he comes back and says, essentially, I'm going to run for president again in this new nationalism speech. And we're going to learn about new nationalism. But as a whole, in this speech in Kansas, he talks about the federal government increasing its power to remedy economic and social issues, regulating companies, busting trusts, and taking care of the tariff issue. So election of 1912, we got three people running, essentially. The National Progressive Republican League is formed. Robert La Follette, he's like the leading candidate, and then Teddy Roosevelt says, essentially, the third term tradition, where we're not supposed to have a third term, doesn't apply, because this is important. My hat is in the ring, and you're not in the frame, you're fine. And so the Progressive Party is these Republicans that have split off, and it's called the Bull Moose Party, is like a slang term for it. For the Democrats, we have Woodrow Wilson, and his idea is not new nationalism, it's new freedom. So the new freedom says we need small business enterprise, entrepreneurship, unregulated and unmonopolized markets, states' rights, some trust busting, some social reform, but mostly leave that to states. So Republicans have Taft and the old guard and those non-progressive, very conservative ideas. The Democrats have Woodrow Wilson, who's like middle of the road, more about economics. And then the progressives that have split off from the Republicans, the Bull Moose Party, have Teddy Roosevelt, their fiery former president. Okay? And here are the results. We have Woodrow Wilson will win this election of 1912, and we will have an entire lecture just on Woodrow Wilson. Thanks for listening. Whew, that was really rushed. Have a good snow day.